Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be all about the books that I read for the month of June, so let's jump in. I was able to finish 6 books for the month of June. We had Tome Topple towards the end of the month, so you will see one of the books featured in this wrap up and then another book in July because it did run until the first week of July. I'm pretty happy with everything that I read and I'm excited to chat about it with you. The first book that I finished, I didn't actually start in June. I believe I started it in May, and it is Spring Tides at Swallowtail Bay. I just want to jump into this book and cuddle up in there. Everything about this book was perfection to me, starting from the setting alone. It is a little town, a little seaside town where everybody knows everybody. Everybody is very kind and nice. And I just, from the minute that I opened that book, I wanted to move here. I actually told the author, I'm like, I want to move to this little town that you have created because it's just perfection. Well, here we are following Stella. And she just comes off from a divorce. She wants to move somewhere different. And I believe she actually visited Swallowtail Bay. And so she's always had this dream of moving there. And it comes true because there is actually a store for sale, a little like gadget store, I think it's like a souvenir kind of store, like a random store. And this old man is selling it. He is ready to retire. But Stella is not the only one that wants this shop. Miles also wants this shop. Now, Miles is a permanent resident. He's lived there his whole entire life. And so he's for sure that he's getting this shop. And so they're like almost at a bidding war, but Stella ends up winning this bidding war. I mean, I don't even know if there was a bidding war, but I know they both wanted this shop really bad. And this shop is not only the shop that she's buying, but it's also 2 holiday lets. And so she ends up winning this bidding war and she ends up moving to this little town. She is ready to start new and she starts coming up with plans to what to do with the shop. She makes friends. Her next door neighbor is actually this little cafe or diner type of place, and she becomes really good friends with the woman that works there and also with the owner, Raina. I can't remember what the friend's name is, but it was such a fun time just reading about this community and Stella starting her life over again. I don't know why I'm enjoying these kinds of like laid back, cozy, romantic kind of books. Now, while this is a romance, it is labeled as romance chick lit kind of reads. I will say that the romance is very minimal. While we do get the romance aspect of it from our 2 characters because they keep thinking about each other in a way, we really don't see the romance of it blossom or turn into anything until the last 5% of the book, which I thought was kind of weird, but I'm not complaining about it too much. I mean, I would have loved to see the romance build up a little bit more and see them together maybe for a little bit longer, but either way, it was just such a feel-good read for me that I enjoyed it so much. Miles, on the other hand, we do get a little bit of him as well. Miles is like the stuck-up, grumpy kind of character. He is in a relationship with this woman and they had talked about, he had proposed to her and they had talked about like getting married, and I think it had been like 2 years since they've talked about it, and finally they're making decisions and plans to go along with the wedding. But he starts noticing like just weird behaviors from his fiance, things that he had never noticed before. Ultimately and mainly it's just how rude she is, especially to the people of this town, and he loves this town so much. Like, he wants to grow old there, and obviously his plans of owning a shop there have fallen through, but he has other plans, and little by little he goes noticing these things, and he goes noticing how it's affecting him as well. I just really could not get enough of Swallowtail Bay and Stella and Miles and Raina, like just everything. I just wanted to go there and visit this restaurant, eat at this restaurant. Raina is said to make like the best, I hope I'm getting the name right. I hope that Raina is the little old lady that owns the cafe and not the friend. I think I'm correct, but there's like this chocolate cake that is like the best chocolate cake, and every time somebody was eating this damn chocolate cake, I wanted some. But this was just the most amazing feel-good book that I've read in a while. I ended up giving this one 4 stars, and spoiler alert, I've already read Summer Strawberries at Swallowtail Bay, which is the second book. I believe this is like a series that has 3 books, but they all follow different sets of characters, which at the beginning I was kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm not gonna get Stella again. You know, I'm not gonna get Stella and Miles. I'm gonna be following 2 different characters. But let me tell you that the minute I started reading Summer Strawberries at Swallowtail Bay, I fell in love with the characters immediately. And we did get to see a little bit of Stella, not too much, a little bit of Stella and Miles, but I was happy with that. But more on Summer Strawberries for the July wrap up, and I cannot wait to talk about them. Like, when I tell you I'm obsessed with this little place, I am obsessed, and I need to get with the author and ask her if this is actually a place that obviously it's not a real place, at least I don't think, but if she mimicked this town from another town that she actually knows that's actually real. I need to ask her, because if it is, then I need to be there. The next book that I read is Kept. I can't remember the author's name because I only wrote the book here, but I don't know how to feel about this book. I was searching through Kindle Unlimited for a book to read towards the challenges, the spring challenge for Kindle Unlimited, and I came upon this one amongst the list. I can't even remember what bookmark I was working towards for this particular book, but I chose it, and what caught me was that it was a Rapunzel retelling. Now this is a reverse harem, dark, like really dark romance book. I usually don't read these types of books. I mean, I like to sprinkle them in every now and then, but I'm not the type of person to love or like a lot of smut in my book. With that being said, I have read some smutty books that I have absolutely loved. This one just made me cringe the whole entire time. And there was times like in the little sex scenes that I was just like, what the is going on here? Like, what is this? Is this supposed to be turn on-y? Because it is not turn on-ing anything over here. I was just like cringing and rolling my eyes. Ultimately, there is this girl. She's been living in this apartment, in this building for a really long time, and you know that she's being held there, but she's taken care of. And in this apartment, there's like these statues, and she becomes friends with these statues. I mean, she knows that they're statues, but she creates like these whole personas for these statues that are in there, and is like talks to them. And I mean, she doesn't have anybody else. Well, one day these 2 guys go and break into this apartment because they are trying to find information on the man that owns this apartment. Obviously, when they get in there, they find this girl. At this particular moment, this girl is chained up. Now, she's usually well taken care of, and she has everything that she needs, but something happens right before they get there when the owner of the place is there, and she's like questioning. She's like, she wants to go out into the real world, and I guess the guy or the man gets kind of nervous and chains her up. And so that's when these 2 guys break into this place and find this girl. Anyways, they decide to break her out and take her with them to their place. Now there's a 3rd man that works, and there's like this mansion type of place that she ends up living in, and there's a 3rd male character in this. That's all I'm gonna say. Shit happens, shit goes on. There is a storyline, a very sweet and nice storyline behind it all, but the actual smutty scenes were just not it for me. Like I said, I've read Penelope Douglas. I mean, 2 of my favorite books are by Penelope Douglas. The one in the mountain, I can't even remember the damn name. I think it starts with a C, but it's one of I just spit all over the place again. Credence. I think it's Credence. It just came into my mind. I love that book. I love that book, and they have a lot of fun up on that mountaintop. So I don't have a problem with that kind of stuff, but this one for me, it just did not work. I ended up giving it 3 stars because I did enjoy the overall story of it. Obviously, I stayed to the end, so I was kind of curious as to see what happened. It wasn't anything like spectacular. I'm even thinking about bringing down my rating to 2 stars because it was cringy more than anything. But I did end up liking the fact that it was a Rapunzel retelling. I love the Rapunzel story, so anytime I hear or see that something is a retelling of Rapunzel, I'm motivated to read it. I guess this book wasn't neither here nor there. I could have done with with some parts. There was one where it's that time of the, listen, I'm not even gonna continue. If you've read Kept, let me know, let's chat about it, because I was a little bit uncomfortable for the majority of it, I'm not gonna lie.
Swallowtail Bay, how I love you.
Then I read Good Half Gone, is that what it is? The next book that I read was Good Half Gone. I actually listened to the audiobook. It was part of the ALC for reviewers on Libro FM, and so I was excited to see it on there. I had only read one Taryn Fisher book before, and so I was excited to read more from her. I think one or two books, but I was excited to read more of hers, and just the synopsis of this sounded so good. And this was so good until it wasn't. Until we start coming up with all these twists and all these reveals, and I was like, wait, whoa, whoa, whoa. In this one, we are following our main character, Piper, and when she was a teenager, she was out at the movies one day with her twin sister, and her twin sister ends up getting kidnapped. Like, she witnesses her getting kidnapped, and when she calls the cops and she tells them what happened, they don't believe her, and they're like, you know what, she probably just ran away and didn't want to tell you anything so that you didn't stop her, kind of situation. So nobody ever believes her, and she's like, no, she was kidnapped. Her and her grandmother are like set to find out who has kidnapped this girl, but whatever. She goes through her life, she grows up, she becomes an adult, has a kid of her own, and just keeps living. But underneath it all, she just never lets go of the fact that her sister was kidnapped, and she is determined to find who has kidnapped her. She actually went to school to become a criminal psychologist, and she gets this internship at this psychiatric hospital that houses criminals, and it's on this island, on Shoal Island. And so she gets the opportunity and she goes, but she goes there with an ulterior motive, because at this place she knows that there is somebody there that knows what happens to her sister. And so she ends up going to this place. Now let me tell you, the setting of this was wonderful, because I believe this is set in Washington. Don't quote me on that. The setting was so perfect, because I love books or settings where you have to get on a ferry to go to an island, and then there's this like psychiatric hospital or any kind of that kind of setting. I just absolutely love. So I enjoyed that part so much. She would actually go to intern at this place, and she would sleep there for a few days, and then she would get to come home for a few days, and then it was a lot of back and forth like that. But you don't see that a lot in the book. You just see that a couple times, and I enjoyed those aspects. I enjoyed the setting of the actual hospital and just seeing it, how it was run day to day. But when it all came down to it, that we got our reveal and our big twists and turns of the novel, I was just like, what? How? Why? I ended up giving it 3 stars because I enjoyed the majority of it, but the last 10 to 15% of the book, it was just too much and too over the top for me to even believe. And I know I say that I like things to be over the top, but at least let me understand them and follow them correctly, and let it not be so convoluted. To me, it was just too much going on, and too much in the explanation process, where I just lost my whole enjoyment of the book. But I still give it 3 stars because the storyline was interesting, the setting was interesting, and I did like Piper, her grandmother. We do get a lot of her as well, and then Piper's son. I did enjoy all the characters and stuff, but just that ending just did not work for me whatsoever. Then I ended up reading The Forest of Hands and Teeth, I was about to say, and Feet. The Forest of Hands and Teeth. Now this is an older piece of fiction. I think it was written in 2009, and if you think about it, it's really not that much of a time length, but when it comes to fiction, it is. This is an apocalyptic novel, and I really did enjoy it, but you can tell that it is an older piece of fiction, especially in the apocalyptic aspect of it. Now this did have some unique things that I did enjoy, but those unique things weren't necessarily in the plot of the book, but it was in the setting and the atmosphere of the book. I really enjoyed that part of it. Ultimately, we're following this village that is behind a fence, like a very guarded and protected fence, from the Forest of Hands and Teeth that is outside of this village, that is full of unconsecrated. This village is under the ruling of the Sisterhood, and they are protected by the Guardians. So those are the main important people, if you will, of the society, the ones that keep things running. The guardians make sure that nothing gets through the fence, that nothing gets in, and obviously nothing gets out. And then the sisterhood, they're the ones that keep the rules running, and they're the ones that have been there the longest and know the history of what has happened in the world. We follow our main character, Mary, for the most part. Being in Mary's head was not very fun. She is a teen. She's wanting more out of life. She wants to see the water. Her mother has always told her stories that there is a place on this earth that is just water as far as the eye can see, and she can't imagine this. So it's her dream to go and see the sea and the ocean and see if it's real. But obviously she's stuck in this village until she is not. As usual, something goes wrong. The village is overrun, and her and a few of her friends, if you will, are on the run, and they are out on their own trying to survive. While I enjoyed the majority of the book, there was times where when we were in Mary's head that I was just like, okay, let's get on with it. Obviously, this is a YA novel, so maybe I'm not in the age group for it anymore. I haven't been in a really long time, but I'm getting to the point where like teens' thoughts and stuff just make me a little like, you know, and I know what it's like. I've been there, you know, but I'm already at that point where I'm like, okay, well, maybe I don't want to be reading about a selfish teenager anymore. And especially given the circumstances that they're in, sometimes her thoughts weren't in alignment with what was happening, and she was just thinking about herself. And while I get that, like, go on, do you, and do what you got to do, you're in survival mode, girl. Now, this is part of a series. I think it's 3 books, and amongst these 3 books, there's like a lot of like 0.5s and 1.5s and 0.2s and 0.3s. So there's a lot of pieces of work for the series. And while I liked how it ended, I don't think I'm interested enough to go into book 2 and see what else happens. I was a little curious when we did finish, but I don't think that I care enough to continue reading the series. I thought this was great. Like I said, I love the atmosphere, and when I think about this book, my brain immediately goes to how I felt and that atmosphere that I read, and I really did enjoy that part. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Then I buddy read The Orphanage by the Lake with my friend Tali, and we really enjoyed this one. This book is part of Kindle Unlimited, so if you're interested in reading it, just know that it's available through there if you do subscribe to KU. First off, the setting of this one was perfection. As you could tell, the settings in all of my books I just absolutely enjoyed, from Swallowtail Bay to Shoal Island, and now we're going to an orphanage that is in upstate New York. I would have loved to have read this book in the fall time because the majority of this book takes place in the fall. So that was my only thing. I was like, I wish I could have experienced this with the correct weather outdoors. I know I'm weird when it comes to that. The orphanage, the drive up to the orphanage that our main character would have, I loved that aspect of it so much. Ultimately, here we are following Hazel, and she is a private investigator. She has her own private investigations business, but it's not going so great. She's really months away from shutting her business down, until one day she gets a new client. Her name is Madeline Hemsley. She's got money, she's a socialite, and she's come to her for help. There has been a disappearance at this orphanage. People around there call it the Orphanage by the Lake because there's this beautiful lake there. This girl has gone missing, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is Madeline's goddaughter. Not granddaughter, her goddaughter. I forget how this girl ends up in this orphanage. I think her parents, she loses her parents and whatever, but she ends up missing. And so Hazel goes on to investigate. And what she finds is just very dark and very sinister. I love that this book went to such a dark place. It's a real rough read, so please make sure that you read up on before going in there for trigger warnings and stuff, because it gets really dark towards the end. This is a very slow burn of a book until you get to the ending, that all the action happens and the darkness comes out. So for me, it's worth it. I love a good slow burn book. My friend thought that it took a little too long to get to the orphanage aspect of it. I thought it was kind of quick. I thought we were gonna be a while before we visited the orphanage, but we just get a handle on how Hazel is, the type of life she lives, who she lives with, her firm, and all of this stuff that she's going through. We get a good grasp on that before we do end up going to the orphanage and meeting Madeline. Madeline, I don't know how I felt about her, but she made Hazel's life kind of impossible for a minute there. So my hat's off to Hazel for really like sticking to this. Obviously she needs the money in order to continue her private investigation business, but Madeline was not easy. But anyways, I loved it. I loved how it ended, so please make sure you look at trigger warnings for this. And I don't want to say too much about it, because I feel like if I tell you what that trigger warning is or what that topic is, it would sort of ruin the whole book, because it is the whole point of the book. But maybe if you can read up and see if somewhere else you can find trigger warnings, because I don't like to ruin books for people. And that was such a surprise for me. I wouldn't say that I was excited to read what it was about, because again, it's a very dark subject. But I'm glad that it took it there, because every time I go into these books, especially how the rest of the book was, I was like, oh, I don't think that they'll take it to that. It's gonna be something stupid. Her disappearance is gonna be something stupid. So I was so happy when it was what it was, even though it's such a messed up matter. But I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Really, really enjoyed it. And the setting, delicious. The setting of, you know, the whole book, not when we get to that setting of when we get to the last part and we see the big reveal, that's not enjoyable. But the whole setting, the orphanage, upstate New York, and even New York itself, because Hazel does live in the city, it was just, I loved it. And the last and final book that I read, I actually have a whole vlog on it. It's my week 1 of Tome Topple, that reading vlog. I'll put it up here just in case you want to take a look at it. I know not everybody likes vlogs, so I will be talking more about the book here. But if you've watched that vlog, then you know the book that wouldn't burn. Oh my goodness, I loved this book so much. It was so good. This book is a little bit hard to sit here and explain, number one, because it is an epic fantasy, but there's so many layers to it. First off, I sobbed my eyes out. I did not see that coming, how much I cried with this book. It really tugged at my heartstrings. But we basically start with Lavira. She is one of our main characters, and she lives in this place that they call the Dust. It's like in the middle of nowhere, and it's almost like this desert kind of setting, and they live a very simple life there. It's a very small village. But one day, as Lavira is, first off, Lavira is amazing from when she's little. So when you see her growing up, she is such a tenacious, such a curious character. She's full of life. She goes where no one goes. She asks all the questions that no one asks, and she's never satisfied with just one answer. She's that type of character. And from the minute that I opened this book, I was in love with her. She is such a grabbing character. But anyways, she's going to fetch some water. Everything has been really dry, and the only water that they can get is from a well that's been dug deep, 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 deep. And she's going to fetch water, and she's almost thinking like, she almost wishes that every time she goes gets water that she would find none, because even though that would be bad change, it would be change, and that's what she's seeking. And you also know that from where she is, the Dust, if you look down the horizon, she can almost see like an outline of buildings, which is the main city, and she dreams of going to the city. But whatever, she's getting her water, she's having all these thoughts like, I wish something would change, and lo and behold, there is somebody coming, like, and she finds this kind of weird. She gets up, she starts running to the village, and she's like, somebody is coming. Nobody ever comes to the Dust. So they know that this is not good. Well, they get sort of attacked, and half of them end up dying, and all the children, or yeah, because I believe all the children get rounded up, they get strung up, and they're meant to follow whoever attacked. When Elvira, or Elvira, I always get her name confused, when Elvira comes to, she is tied up with a bunch of other kids, and they're following these people or these things, and right in the middle of when they're being dragged, let's say, these other people get attacked and they get saved in a way. And guess where they're taken? They are taken to the city. So here comes one of Elvira's dreams, or Elvira's dreams come true, because she does make it to the city. But this also follows another storyline, which we are following Ever. I think it's Ever.
Is it Ever or is it Ever? I think it's Ever.
He has always lived in this room, or in this maze, or in this chamber that's just full of books. Everywhere that you turn, there's like towers of books, and he's always lived there. He's always been stuck there. He doesn't know anything else, along with 2 brothers and a sister. Now, they're not really brothers and sister, but they just feel that way because they grew up in this chamber full of books. And you know that at the beginning he's trying to build a staircase with these books to reach all the way to the top of the room, of the chamber, because all the way up there is a window. He's never seen the outside. He's never been out of this chamber. And so he wants to get out. This is another character that I love so much. Not as tenacious as Elvira, but he's more warm-hearted. He's more caring. He's just so sweet. But obviously he doesn't make it up there. Like, his dream is to make it outside. Now, somehow these 2 worlds come together. They're on a quest to survive and to change the world. I don't even know how else to say it. I don't want to say too much. I mean, this is a big chunker. It's an epic fantasy. I don't think I could tell you too much to spoil the book, because so much happens in it. There's almost like a time travel aspect to it. There's a whimsical aspect to it. Following Elvira, following Ever, and just the whole storyline was so good. I ended up giving this one 5 stars. I am so eager to jump to book 2 because I need to know how this story continues. Needless to say, this was my favorite book that I read in the month of June. It was just so good. If you've read this one, let's chat about it. If you want to talk spoilers, if you have Instagram, then maybe you can send me a DM on there. It takes me a while sometimes to get to those DMs because I haven't been as active on Instagram, but I will get to it. But if you've read this, let's chat about it. I cannot stop thinking about this book. Definitely my favorite read of the month. And if I had to pick another favorite read, it would probably have to go to Spring Tides at Swallowtail Bay. Oh my gosh, I can't get over of how it was just such a feel-good book that I'm still feeling good. And like I said, if there is such a place as Swallowtail Bay, which I'm sure there is, I mean, come on, the inspiration had to come from somewhere. I definitely want to go. So that's it, you guys. Those are all the books that I read for the month of June. Let me know what you read for the month. What was your favorite read and what was your least favorite read? Let's chat books in the comment section down below. As usual, all these books will be linked in the description bar. They are affiliate links, so just keep that in mind. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye.